Y'all, can I tell you about these Tecovas boots? I don't know if y'all know this, but these boots are handmade, high quality, stylish, and comfortable right out of the box. I know we buy everything online these days, but boots are something you really should get fitted for. And it just so happens Tecovas is based right here in Austin. So come shop with me at the Tecovas store on South Congress or the Domain. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. Today on CityCast Austin, budget season just kicked off at Austin City Hall. But don't skip this episode. I promise we won't put you to sleep. The first draft of the budget is out now, and the fighting has begun over what should be cut and what should be funded. And they have to have it worked out by August 16th. Joining me to make sense of it all is Amy Stansberry, editor-in-chief of the Austin Comment. CityCast Austin is brought to you by our exclusive launch sponsor, Tecovas. It's Wednesday, July 17th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Today, I am sitting down with Amy Stansberry, editor-in-chief of the Austin Comment. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. We are talking budgets today. Before we get too far into it, I want you to explain, or your opinion, why should the everyday constituent care about budget allocations and the budget process that's happening at City Hall right now?
Yeah, I always say that if you're going to get engaged on one issue at the local level, one city issue all year, it should be the city budget. Because it's like, the biggest bang for your buck, so to speak. Because if something's in the budget, that means it'll actually happen. And if it's not in the budget, it's very difficult to have programs and initiatives go forward with no funding. So It's a really great way to have a super long lasting impact at the city is to get involved in these budget conversations. And it's not as boring as it sounds. I love the city's budget.
I am so glad that you said that. So it's really funny. I used to work there. I know people are tired of me saying that, but I am often made bored by math. I'll just be honest about that. But the budget process is fascinating. It's really interesting. It's how you find out where your money is going. It's how you find out the truth about what the city is spending.
Yeah, and it impacts everyone. It's one of those things.
Exactly.
You can't be like, oh, this isn't really my thing. It's your thing. Your property taxes pay for it. It's your thing.
Thank you. New city manager TC Broadnax presented the proposed 2024-25 budget for the city of Austin. And this is kind of his first test. So how do you think he did in just kind of laying everything out? Because we're learning now that he is a man, kind of a few words. And it seems he's very reserved and to the point.
Yeah, it was a pretty simple, straightforward, undramatic budget reveal day. I think a lot of emphasis was focused on not a lot of flash, just here's the numbers, here's where we're at, here's how the public can get involved, here's how the city council can edit it. And that was it.
I like that. That sounds kind of like that's going to be a welcome change. You know what I mean? Just like pop, pop, pop. Here we are. Great. That's what I mean. Like that's.
Yeah.
I
what
love
do I need
that.
to know?
Well, yeah. And so, can you walk us through the city of Austin's budget briefly? I know the general operating budget is over $5 billion, which sounds like it's a lot. I know it sounds like it's a lot, but that is everything that the city spends money on for a year. Can you break that down a little bit?
Yeah, I usually tell folks that there's 3 city budgets you need to know about. So one is the operating budget, sometimes called the all funds budget. It's $5.9 billion for this year. And it includes what are called enterprise departments. And so that's the little buzzword you'll hear a lot in council conversations. Enterprise departments are like Austin Water, Austin Energy, Austin Resource Recovery, the Aviation Department. These, for the most part, are departments that are able to earn the money that they spend by usually charging a fee for their service. So they're kind of self-funded. And they make up the bulk of that budget. But then about a quarter of that all funds operating budget is for what's called the general fund budget. And that is where all the drama happens, is in the general fund.
That's so funny. I was thinking magic, but drama's better.
So the general fund is $1.4 billion this year. And that includes kind of your bread and butter city services, police, fire, EMS, parks, libraries. And all of these departments are the ones that are more taxpayer subsidized. So they may charge small fees for service. You pay to get into Barton Springs Pool, but that doesn't fund the entire parks department, right? So these departments are more subsidized, and that also means that there's more debate around who should get what money we have, right? There's a little bit more flow in there. And so that's where the big conversation happens. And then the last budget doesn't tend to get as much love, but it's the capital budget. And that's an additional $2.2 billion this year. That money, yes, that money funds big projects the city works on. Airport expansion, the new convention center expansion.
Yeah.
That's money we've already approved. That's just kind of continuing on its way, working on these big picture. So you've got like your daily operations, and then you have your capital, which is usually new buildings or initiatives.
You just made the budget. You just explained the budget so easy. So I really want to talk about this general fund because like you said, that's where the drama is, and it is. $1.4 billion. We're talking police, parks, libraries, etc. It's taxpayer subsidized. It's more discretionary, but there's a community investment budget of $4 million. Can you expand a little bit on what that is? It's unspent funds. What does that mean?
This $4 million is kind of a pool of money that the city manager identified as he hasn't directed it to go anywhere yet. It's kind of open funds. And he told city council, hey, we've got this $4 million for new initiatives, new programs. Now, there's also another thing going on in town called the community investment budget. And that is a real community-led initiative. Dozens and dozens of local nonprofits have signed on to it. And they are asking city council to really make even bigger investments in a lot of social programs in the city. So their total that they're asking for is $76.3 million, which is about 5.5% of that general fund. And so this is a long list of asks, but it includes a lot of things, social programs, increased spending on homelessness services. Obviously that $4 million is way less than 76 million. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of the conversation in the coming weeks is how do we get as much of that community investment budget put in there? And already you hear city council members asking questions about how can we grow that 4 million? How can we get more money? Because a lot of them really do want to fund a lot of what's in there.
76.3 million. And so are there other places in the budget that some of that money could come from? Or can it only be taken out of this like $4 million of unspent funds?
Potentially. And I guess it depends who you ask. It gets really complicated fast, but I'll keep it high level. One potential option or area of conversation is that we do have some reserve funds as a city. And the specifics of how that all works gets a little confusing, but we sort of dedicate a certain percentage that we want to put in that reserve fund. And the idea is if something bad were to happen, if there's an emergency, that there's extra money, the city kind of sets aside a certain amount of extra money. There is sort of a debate about what is the right amount of extra money to set aside. And could a little less be set aside so that we could spend some more now on what some people would already call an emergency, right? Like rental assistance for families that are getting displaced right now, right? And so there is a little bit, I think you'll hear some conversation around that. But then in other parts of the city's budget, right now, just because of the way things work with inflation, with healthcare costs, with, paying employees more who work at the city, a lot of the city's budget, it's not like new things, a ton of new programs are being added in. It's just like the cost of doing business continues to rise.
Right. Yeah.
And so
okay.
that
That's
makes
right.
the
Cost
budget,
of living.
Yeah. So that makes the budget really tight. So that makes it really difficult. The city's budget office has shown some slides and presentations. They call them base cost drivers. And they say that, without adding any new programs, without adding any new employees, you can see just the cost that the city has to spend to maintain what it has now going up and up and up every year just because of things like that health insurance, like wage increases. The city does have in the current budget a 4% wage increase for civilian employees, which is important because you might have heard things about vacancy rates at the city, right? It's like, you got to pay people more if you want to fight those vacancy rates, right? And so there is, it's not an easy task, you know.
We'll be right back after this break to talk about how the Austin Animal Shelter fits into next year's budget. And we are back with Amy of the Austin Common. When you're talking about, okay, we have all this money that we need, but at the same time, it is getting more and more expensive to just operate and exist, right? So like, how can we balance that? And what always comes to my brain is sales tax. Like, it's always a question mark. The general fund is property tax, sales tax, and utility transfers. Sales tax is always different now. We know that it was predicted to be lower than the actual number. When does the conversation about raising sales tax happen? Like, or am I trying to compare apples and tomatoes?
So sales tax, the city's budget office says a lot, is our most volatile source of income. So it's difficult to plan around because certain years, like right after COVID, you know, we had really high sales tax. People were out and about buying things, shopping, doing everything. And that was great, you know, the cities. And then now that's starting to level off again. It's not like it's plummeted or anything, but it's just not as good as it was a few years ago. And I'll admit, I'm not an expert in sales tax. I have not heard a lot of conversations at City Hall about raising the sales tax. I don't know what would go into doing that. But for property taxes, which make up about half of the general fund, that is always the conversation. So as all Austinites know, your property taxes are rising. So the city
oh my gosh.
You are certainly paying more money. You know, your property tax is increasing, and that is an area where the city is able to compensate, but they have this limit. So there's a 3.5% cap that was imposed by the state a few years ago. And that means that as a city, the city can't take in more than 3.5% in additional revenue from property taxes year over year. Yeah, so there are a few exceptions to that. So if the city wanted to, they could bust over that 3.5%, but they would have to go to the voters and we would have to approve it, which is politically, you know, can be difficult or is a question mark. We've never tried that, you know, since this new cap was imposed. And, and I haven't really heard that be on the table for this year, but I think that you might see that, you know, in the future.
All right, y'all. Another reason for you to be invested in the budget. I'm guessing there's a lot of people that just don't know that they have that much power, number one. And number two, that, you know, this is something that might come down the pipe, maybe.
Yeah. And, you know, the state puts a lot of limits on how our budget is structured. That's one of the ways is that 3.5% cap. And then they also have that rule around our police department budget. So there is a rule passed by the state that says large cities like Austin can't really lower our police department budget. Again, there are a few exceptions or you can ask for permission. So that means anytime you increase the police department's budget, and this is something you might hear come up when they're debating this, you're really locking that in for a long time into the future. So the city has to really think about that choice every time they make it, because next year they can't just come back and say, oh, we're going to lower it back down again. They don't really have a lot of flexibility there. It can really only rise.
So we cannot lower the police budget. So if it's projected that they're going to get an increase, whatever increase they get, if they get it, that is set.
That's correct. Yeah, that's pretty much the case. Police does make up the largest percentage of the general fund budget. It's about 35%. And so for reference, EMS is about 10%. Wow. And fire is 18.5%. So the police make up a lot. Parks is about 9.4%.
Wow. And so speaking of other things that, you know, the general fund could be possibly used for, let's talk about the animal shelter. They're struggling. Can we just give them more money and build them a bigger shelter? They asked for a $400,000 increase for next year. That's it. They had to halt all of their intakes. The building isn't big. Like, how big? $400,000 again doesn't seem like a lot of money to me.
Right. It's not a lot of money. It is an increase. And so they say that money is going literally just to defray the cost of rising cost of food, medical supplies, and maintenance. As far as what would truly fix it seems like a lot of that money would just sort of help stabilize or prevent the crisis from getting worse. The animal shelter is going to be a topic of conversation. This is what's been proposed, but that's the kind of thing that you might see city council come out with additional recommendations beyond this proposal, at least for staffing. But as far as the building, that is unfortunately an even larger initiative.
It makes sense. It makes sense. But does it seem to you a little disingenuous for a city that's no kill? We are no kill, right? And so
yes. And this is the big problem.
Some point, yeah, that at some point you're going to have to make room for the fact that we are a no kill city.
And I think this is what happens a lot. You'll see in the budget, a lot of debate around the city. We like to come up with big, bold plans and initiatives. But then the question is, are we following through on them? Are we actually achieving our commitment?
Exactly.
So another big conversation this budget cycle is the city's climate equity plan, which is our dedication to get to about net zero greenhouse gases by 2040. And there's a lot of other goals in between. And it's a big, ambitious plan. Are we going to meet those goals? Are we putting the money behind it that we need to in order to make sure that happens? And so that's a lot of the tension that comes out of budget season is, are we actually putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak, in order to achieve the goals we want?
I want to talk about rate increases. Now, I know that, that's another conversation that comes up when it's budget time. I know that I saw Austin Water is proposing a rate increase. Are there any other offices that you know of that are proposing a rate increase?
So usually what we call this are taxpayer impacts. That is inclusive of property taxes, the bills you pay to Austin Water, Austin Resource Recovery, Austin Energy. None of these singularly has a huge average monthly increase, but added together, it's meaningful. But the biggest pieces of this, you do have Austin Water proposing about a $6.21 monthly increase, again, for the average user. When it comes to the utilities, a lot of the driving factor behind these increases is it's what you can imagine, right? Water is in limited supply. We all see that. The city is having to invest more resources in trying to keep the water we have, right? That can be things like improving pipes so that they're not dripping, investing in more efficient infrastructure, all these things. And so that's sort of what gets listed as a lot of the cost drivers for things like, and even as our city grows, right? You just have more people using the system, putting more strain on it. It gets older. The exact breakdown is, if you just look at the property taxes, it's about $102 increase per year. And if you look at taxes and fees, it's about $272. So that's where the bigger increases this year is in those fees. And a lot of that is coming from some of those utilities.
Ooh, I gotta say, I am not going to envy my former colleagues that are going to have to hear about that.
It's not an easy job. It's really not an easy job.
It's not.
It's really difficult. It's a lot of
job.
Priorities you have to balance here. It's super difficult. And you could hear that at this first council meeting when this budget was released. You have people who are calling on city council to invest in these really important programs. And then you also have people who are saying, hey, I'm on a really limited income. I cannot afford to have these increases.
How can people get involved? I know there are a bunch of town halls coming up.
Yes, I definitely recommend people go to a city town hall. So each council member is going to be hosting one of these in their district. Most of them are also doing a hybrid version, so you could tune in online. I've been to these town hall meetings before. They're often not crowded.
Which is surprising.
Yeah.
It surprises me.
But there's not a lot of people there, which is good and bad, I guess. But if you're someone who wants to be engaged, it's kind of a good thing for you. It means you actually really could get the chance to have some real FaceTime with your council member and tell them what you think. These meetings they're less intimidating. You don't have to stand up and testify. Usually what will happen is a council member or someone from the city will give a little presentation about what's in the budget, and then they'll ask for feedback. I've been to ones where there have been good group conversations, or you put Post-it notes on the wall. You don't have to be an expert in all these numbers we just said. I always just ask people, just think, like, what is the most important thing the city does to you? And do you feel like it could be better?
That's a great prompt. Give your opinion. Tell them what you think. Ask questions about things that you are not quite sure about, especially when it comes to the budget, because 9 times out of 10, the budget officer is also there. There are also people that work in the budgeting department that are there to answer questions. It's a really good opportunity to get some serious FaceTime from, excuse the expression, horse's mouth.
Yeah, and your neighbors are there. It can be a really...
And your neighbors are there.
Yeah, it can be a really cool way to just meet other people in your community and hear what they're advocating for. People might ask, what's the point? What's the influence I can have? I have really seen, I'm sure you saw it when you worked at City Hall too, the impact that people have around the city's budget. City Council is really susceptible to what the public is coming and asking them for during this time, and showing up and making it known what your priorities are. That can have a real, tangible, monetary impact in just the next month.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything else that you want to add?
Another little thing that you might hear come up around the budget is parks this year. So in Austin, we've been fortunate enough that we've gained and added more parkland in the last decade or so, but we have not added the correct number of maintenance employees to work on that parkland. And so right now, they're sort of estimating that we need 16 additional maintenance workers just to get us back to the service levels we had in 2014. Just to get us back to where we were, just because we've grown so much as a city. So that's another big topic of conversation. I've heard several council members flag, community members flag. So that's another one that probably will come up.
That is crazy to me because Austin is such a green city. Like, we love our green spaces. We love our parks. We love our trails. You would think that parks would be something that would be pretty prominent in the budget and just making sure we have everything we need. And it's not in this proposal yet, but they're pushing for it, right?
Right. It is not in this proposal yet.
You have made the Austin budget palatable.
Well, thanks for having me on. I love to talk to people about the city's budget.
Thank you so much for being here with me today, Amy. I really have had a blast. Okay. And we're going to have you back.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Bye. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Amy's work in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend what you learned about the budget? And rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.